Right now, somewhere in Egypt, a stone block weighing 2.5 tons is sitting exactly where it was placed 4,500 years ago. It has not moved, not an inch, not in 45 centuries of earthquakes, floods, wars, and empires rising and falling around it. And yet the people who put it there had no steel, no engines, no cranes, no wheels. So how did they do it? You probably think you already know the answer. Slaves, thousands of them, whipped and broken under a desert sun, hauling stones until they died. That is the story most people carry. But that story is wrong. And the truth is far stranger and far more human than anything you have been told. Forget everything the movies showed you. Forget the whips. Forget the chains. The real story of how the pyramids were built is a story about beer, about loyalty, about an economy that did not use money, and about a civilization so organized it makes modern project management look amateur. It is a story about what human beings are actually capable of when they believe in something. And once you understand how it was really done, you will never look at the pyramids the same way again. Let us start with the workers. In 1990, a horse stumbled near the Giza Plateau and broke through the ground into a hidden tomb. Egyptologist Mark Lenner and his team excavated what was underneath, and what they found shattered the slave narrative permanently. They found a workers' village, a real one, with bakeries, breweries, sleeping quarters, medical facilities, and burial sites, proper burial sites, with care and ritual, the kind given to people who were valued. The workers who built the pyramids were buried with respect. Slaves are not buried with respect. They found evidence of cattle bones, fish, and bread in enormous quantities. The workers were being fed. Well, organized labor records from the same site showed workers received wages not in coin but in rations: beer, bread, onions, and meat. Lenner estimated that at any given time, around 20 to 30,000 workers were living at Giza. Not hundreds of thousands. 20 to 30,000. And they rotated in on 3-month shifts from villages all across Egypt. This was not slavery. This was a national labor project, and the workers came willingly. Why would they come willingly? Because in ancient Egypt, working on the pharaoh's pyramid was not punishment, it was honor. The pharaoh was not just a king, he was a god made flesh, the force holding the universe together. Building his eternal monument was the closest an ordinary Egyptian could get to touching the divine. To work on the pyramid was to secure your own place in the afterlife. You were not a slave. You were a participant in something cosmic. That distinction changed everything about how the work was done. Now think about the logistics. 20 to 30,000 people in a desert. Every single day. Those people needed to eat, drink, sleep, and work in the crushing heat. Researcher Juan José Castillos has analyzed the administrative records that survive from the Old Kingdom period, and the scale of the supply operation is staggering. The site consumed hundreds of cattle and thousands of sheep and goats every month. Bakeries were producing bread at industrial scale. Breweries were running around the clock. Beer was not a luxury. Beer was nutrition. It was safer than water, it provided calories, and it was issued as part of every worker's daily ration. The pyramid was not built on suffering, it was built on bread and beer. But none of that explains how you move a 2.5-ton block of limestone across a desert without a wheel. Here's where it gets fascinating. For decades, archaeologists assumed the Egyptians used wooden sleds, dragging stones across dry sand. It seemed logical, but dry sand creates enormous friction. The numbers did not work. Then in 2014, a team studying the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep, a regional governor who lived roughly 1,000 years after the pyramids, found a painting. In that painting, a massive stone statue is being dragged on a wooden sled. And at the front of the sled, A single worker is pouring liquid onto the sand just ahead of it. The researchers ran the physics. Wetting the sand just enough, not too much, not too little, reduces friction by up to 50%. The Egyptians had figured out tribology, the science of friction, 4,000 years before the word existed. They did not need wheels. They needed water. But the water trick only worked for surface transport. The real mystery had always been about scale. The Great Pyramid of Giza contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. At the peak of construction, workers needed to place around 12 blocks per hour to finish on schedule. Some of the interior blocks weigh up to 80 tons. Moving those is a different problem entirely. For a long time, the dominant theory was ramps. Long, straight ramps of compacted rubble that the Egyptians built alongside the pyramid as it rose, hauling stones up the incline. But there is a mathematical problem with this theory. To build a ramp steep enough to reach the top of the Great Pyramid, while still gentle enough for workers to haul stones up it, the ramp would need to be roughly a mile long and contain more material than the pyramid itself. That makes no sense. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin spent years building a digital model of the pyramid's construction and proposed something different: an internal spiral ramp. Workers would haul blocks up an outer ramp for the lower levels. Then, as the pyramid grew higher, they would switch to a ramp built inside the pyramid itself, spiraling upward just below the outer surface. Open notches at the corners would allow workers to maneuver the blocks around the turns. Radar scans of the pyramid, conducted by the Scan Pyramids project in 2016 and 2017, found anomalies consistent with internal spiral structures exactly where Houdin's model predicted them. The pyramid may have been built from the inside. Think about what that means. The builders were not just moving stone, they were engineering a machine to build itself. Now consider the stone itself. Most of the pyramid's blocks came from a quarry about a quarter-mile away, but the granite used in the interior chambers, the King's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, came from Aswan. That is 800 kilometers south of Giza. Moving granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons from Aswan to Giza across desert and river in the ancient world should have been impossible, and yet they did it. Researcher Mark Lehner discovered, in 2013, a lost harbor at the foot of the Giza Plateau, an ancient port buried under centuries of sand, connected to a now-dried branch of the Nile. The Egyptians did not drag granite across the desert. They floated it. They built a harbor. They carved channels. They turned the Nile into a highway and used flood season, when the river swelled toward Giza, to deliver the heaviest stones by boat. The logistics were not improvised. They were engineered, precisely. And then there is the question of precision itself. The Great Pyramid's base is level to within 2 centimeters across 230 meters. The 4 sides are aligned to true north, south, east, and west with an accuracy of less than 1/10 of 1 degree. This was achieved without GPS, without satellites, without any instrument we would recognize as modern. Researcher Kate Spence published a paper in Nature in 2000 proposing that the Egyptians aligned the pyramid using 2 stars that circle the north celestial pole, watching the point where a plumb line hanging between them pointed to true north. An astronomical alignment method so elegant it required nothing but a rope, a weight, and the night sky. They looked up at the stars and drew a straight line to true north. And they were right. Now stop for a moment and hold all of this together. 20 to 30,000 workers, fed, paid in beer and bread, rotating in shifts from villages across Egypt, a harbor carved into the desert, boats carrying 80-ton granite slabs up the flooded Nile, wetted sand reducing friction by half, an internal ramp spiraling up through the body of the pyramid itself, a foundation leveled to within 2 centimeters using nothing but water. celestial navigation pinpointing true north with 1/10 of a degree of accuracy. This was not brutality. This was civilization operating at the absolute edge of what human beings could do with their minds and their bodies, and their belief in something larger than themselves. The pyramid was not built by slaves, it was built by people who thought what they were doing mattered. People who were fed well enough to work, organized well enough to function, and inspired enough to keep going. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of the story. Because the next time you look at something in your world and ask how it was built, the real answer is almost never whips and chains. It is almost always what it was 4,500 years ago. People who believed they were part of something. People who showed up. People who moved the stone, and the stone is still there.